let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Texas.
Yeah, man.
Last night, I know many of you were watching the RNC debates, and people watching or listening to this show were probably watching people watching the debates. But however you slice it, the GOP is the party of conservative reactionary insanity. My co host Pascal Robert was a guest last night on the Katie Halper show and did some play by play on those goings on. And he, like me, felt like the current crop of GOP hopefuls might be to the far right of Donald Trump. But what does that all mean? We've said on this show many times that more and more rights that had federal protection are being rolled back to the states. Take abortion, for example. Texas has been on the forefront of anti abortion bills, becoming a hellscape for women's, gay, and transgender rights. What's the matter with Texas? And is Governor Greg Abbott acting like a king ruling over his own fiefdom? Or is he just echoing the sentiments of the people? David, I know you're one of in the more liberal parts of the state in Austin, but how are people outside of the capital responding to Abbott and what's currently happening in Texas?
I mean, across the board, I think you got to note a couple things about Texas is that, while we do have a conservative majority, it's a state that doesn't look, despite what a lot of people claim, that it's going to flip to the Democratic Party anytime soon. The way that the Republican Party right now has been operating, like primarily coming from Abbott, is really out of step with most Texans' opinions on like these hot button issues, right? Things that people do have strong opinions on. And but you look at something like abortion, like what you just talked about. If you look at polling in Texas, people aren't very supportive of like a effective like outright ban, like which is effectively what we have at this point. There's a little bit of a in areas like what level, what stage do you support abortions, but like what we're getting in policy is not very reflective of even what conservative Texans want. And you can go across the board on that, from gun policy, economic policy. More and more the Republican Party in Texas is operating like on the fringes even of their own base. And I think a large part of that comes from the fact that the Texas political system is very skewed in one direction, which means that there's only one real force when it comes to being a threat to your reelection campaign, and that is going to be the far right part of the Texas GOP primary voters, right? So a very like if you think about the entirety of the population of Texas, and then you think about the people who vote in the GOP primary, we're talking about a sliver of those folks who are making a lot of noise and getting listened to. But I think too, if you spend too much time like fixating on the voters, you miss what's going on behind the scene. And I'm sure as like we get into some of like the other issues, go into a little bit more detail. But I mean, this state is like captured by private interest. Like, look at what's going on at the border, right? You think about the horror of it, the brutality of it, but there's a lot of money to be made, right? There's a lot of money to be made. Operation Lone Star, which is Abbott's like mobilization of the Texas National Guard to the border, all of these kind of stunts that you're seeing. There's people who are outfitting these state trooper. I'm sorry, these the National Guardsmen. There are people who are furnishing the wire. There's people who are, getting contracts with the state to do all sorts of things, and it is very much like unregulated and unchallenged politically. And people are, walking away with significant millions of dollars. And it just so happens a lot of these guys tend to be major donors to Craig Abbott's reelection campaign, or which we could talk about maybe more in depth later if you want to. What's going on in prisons right now. Most cells in Texas, nearly 70% of Texan cells do not have any kind of air conditioning, which means,
Whoa,
yeah,
that's
which
heavy.
means it's horrifying. And in the past 3 months, when we're in this, the thing is always funny. Is like Texas is it's a hot place, right? We all get that, but there's a difference between this is a Texas summer, it's hot, versus what we've been experiencing now. We in Austin, we just broke a record, 47 days over 100 degrees, unprecedented. The previous marker was something like 25, 26 days, right? So significant increases in heat. And, it's brutal what they're doing to these prisoners, but I also think that it's important to remember that there's money to be made, just like on something simple like bottled water. They've increased the prices on how much they are charging inmates for bottled water by 50% in the past month.
Jesus.
Right. So like
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize that there's like the brutality and the cruelty and all of that kind of stuff. But there's also just so much money to be made by some of these really nefarious actors in the state too.